Jake Martinez had exactly 3 regrets in life. The first was that time he ate gas station sushi on a dare. The second was trusting his navigation AI, which had the personality of a passive-aggressive teenager. The third, and most recent, was parking his cargo freighter in what turned out to be the personal landing spot of Ambassador Threl Minax of the Galactic Council. In Jake's defense, there were no signs. Well, okay, there were signs, several of them, in 16 different languages. But Jake had been flying for 47 hours straight on nothing but coffee and spite. So really, who could blame him? The Vraxon detention complex could blame him, apparently. The prison loomed ahead like a bad decision made of steel and poor lighting. Jake shuffled through the intake process in magnetic cuffs, flanked by 2 guards who looked like they'd been designed by someone who thought scorpions needed more arms and worse attitudes. "Aggressive parking," Jake muttered, shaking his head. "That's what they're calling it, aggressive parking." "Silence, human!" hissed the guard on his left. "I mean, I've been called aggressive before, sure. Got a little aggressive with a vending machine once, but my parking? My parking is actually pretty gentle. I kissed that landing pad like a grandmother's cheek." The guard on his right jabbed him with something that felt like a cattle prod, but probably had a fancier name. Jake yelped. They dragged him through corridors that smelled like despair and industrial cleaner. Past cells containing the galaxy's most colorful criminals. A blob creature that might have been purple or might have been angry. A crystalline thing that hummed ominously. Something with too many teeth and not enough face. Finally, they reached the Warden's office. Warden Kreltok was exactly the kind of alien who'd chosen his career path out of spite. 4 arms, scales that looked like they'd been polished with the tears of the damned, and eyes that suggested he'd never laughed at anything that wasn't suffering. He sat behind a desk that was probably compensating for something. "You're human," Kreltok said, his voice like gravel being chewed by a garbage disposal. "Do you know why you're here?" "Aggressive parking," Jake said helpfully. "You violated Galactic Diplomatic Protocol 774, subsection 9, paragraph 12. You are fortunate Ambassador Threlminax is a forgiving soul, or you'd be facing execution. So instead I'm facing what exactly? Community service? A strongly worded lecture about reading signs?" Kreltok's smile was the kind that made small children cry and hardened criminals reconsider their life choices. "No, human. You're facing the Vraxon detention complex. And more specifically, you're facing me." He stood up, all 4 arms spread wide like he was about to hug Jake or crush him into paste. 50-50 odds, really. For 3,000 years, this facility has held the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. For 3,000 years, no one has escaped. Not the Thorian berserkers, not the Zephyr telepaths, not the quantum phase assassins of Nebula 7. Do you know why? Budget cuts? Jake offered. The cattle prod came out again. Jake decided to shut up. "The quantum maze," Kreltok continued, clearly enjoying his villain monologue. "A dimensional labyrinth that shifts, teleports, and rearranges itself every 37 seconds. It drives most beings insane within an hour. Those who don't go mad simply wander until they die of thirst. It is perfect. It is inescapable. It is my life's work." "That's kind of sad, actually," Jake said. "You should get a hobby, knitting, birdwatching, literally anything else." Kreltok's eyes narrowed to slits. "You will learn respect, human. Your species may be new to the galactic stage, but here you are nothing special. You are just another inmate. Just another failure waiting to happen." "Cool speech," Jake said, yawning. "Quick question, though. Do you guys have Wi-Fi here? Because I was in the middle of a really important message thread about whether hot dogs are sandwiches, and I'd hate to leave people hanging." The warden stared at him for a long moment. Then he smiled again, and this smile was somehow worse than the first one. "Oh, I'm going to enjoy breaking you." Jake's cellmate was a creature named Marcus, which was apparently a nickname because his real name was 12 syllables long and involved clicking sounds that human vocal cords couldn't manage. Marcus looked like what would happen if you took an accountant, dipped him in green paint, gave him antenna, and then told him his taxes were being audited. "You seem nice," Marcus said nervously, wringing his 4-fingered hands. "Please don't kill me in my sleep." "Why would I kill you?" Jake asked, examining the cell. It was about as welcoming as a dentist's waiting room, and twice as depressing. "Well, you're human. I've heard stories. Your species fought off the Krell Armada with nuclear weapons strapped to asteroids. You terraformed a moon using nothing but determination and concerning amounts of explosives. You eat capsaicin for fun. That last one's not even a weapon, Marcus. That's just hot sauce. You weaponized plants." Jake decided not to mention what humans had done with potatoes and distillation. Marcus seemed fragile enough already. The next morning, if you could call it morning in a windowless prison floating in space, Warden Krell Tok arrived with an entourage of guards and what looked like a camera crew. "Today," the warden announced, "I will show you why hope is pointless here." They marched Jake through the facility, while other inmates pressed against their cell bars, watching with expressions ranging from pity to morbid curiosity. Marcus trailed behind, looking like he might faint. The quantum maze entrance was everything you'd expect from something called the quantum maze. Swirling lights that hurt to look at. A doorway that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Air that tasted like static electricity. And poor decisions. "Behold!" Krell Tok said, gesturing dramatically. "The perfect prison!" A holographic display flickered to life, showing a 3-dimensional map that made Jake's eyes water. The maze twisted through space like someone had taught a pretzel to hate geometry. "The maze exists in 9 dimensions simultaneously," the warden explained, clearly enjoying himself. "It teleports sections of itself at random. The walls phase through matter. The floors occasionally decide to become ceilings. Gravity is more of a suggestion than a rule." "Sounds like my ex's apartment," Jake muttered. Krell Tok ignored him. "The record for survival inside is 4 hours and 17 minutes, held by a Thorian berserker named Grakthor the Unbreakable. He came out broken." The hologram shifted, showing previous escape attempts. A massive horned creature that had apparently tried to smash through walls until the maze smashed back. A group of floating brain things that had linked their minds together and still couldn't figure it out. "The Zephyr Collective," Krell Tok said, pointing to the brain things. 23 of the galaxy's greatest telepaths working as one. They mapped 3% of the maze before their consciousness shattered. We had to separate them into individual tanks. They still scream sometimes, but only in languages that no longer exist. "You're really selling this place," Jake said. "Very upbeat. Great for morale." Marcus tugged on Jake's sleeve. "Please don't do anything stupid," he whispered. "I've been here 8 years for tax fraud. 8 years. I just want to serve my time quietly and maybe get out before I'm too old to enjoy freedom. Don't make waves." 8 years for tax fraud?" Jake asked. "What did you do? Claim your spaceship as a dependent?" "I may have accidentally declared my entire planet as a business expense. That's honestly impressive." Krell Tok was still talking, which seemed to be his favorite activity after ruining lives. "The maze learns," he continued. "It adapts to attempts to solve it. Brute force fails, intelligence fails, telepathy fails, magic fails. The only beings who make it through are the ones I allow through, using my personal override codes." He turned to Jake, all 4 arms crossed. "So, human, do you understand now? Do you grasp the futility of resistance?" Jake pulled a slightly squashed granola bar from his pocket. Prison intake had somehow missed it during the search. He unwrapped it slowly, took a bite, and chewed thoughtfully, while Krell Tok's face went through several interesting colors. "Is that a protein-based nutrient bar?" the warden sputtered. "How did you smuggle that in?" "I didn't smuggle anything," Jake said through a mouthful of oats and despair. "It was in my pocket. Your guards are just really bad at their jobs." The guards looked at each other nervously. Krell Tok's scales rippled with barely contained rage. "You dare mock me. You dare mock my facility. Perhaps you need a personal demonstration of the maze's power." "Nah, I'm good," Jake said, finishing his granola bar. "It wasn't a suggestion." "Oh," Jake considered this. "Can I bring snacks?" The thing about humans, Jake reflected as guards strapped monitoring equipment to him, was that they were absolutely terrible at recognizing danger. Not because they were stupid, mind you. Humans had made it to space, figured out faster-than-light travel, and successfully negotiated trade agreements with species that communicated through interpretive dance. No, humans were bad at recognizing danger because somewhere in their evolutionary history, they'd decided that the appropriate response to being told something was impossible was to say, "Hold my beer," and try it anyway. Jake didn't have beer, but the principle remained. "Final chance to back out," Kreltok said, practically vibrating with anticipation. "You can return to your cell and live out your sentence in relative peace." "How long is my sentence again? 15 years. For parking?" "Aggressive parking in a diplomatic zone during a peace summit. The ambassador's guards had to move your ship themselves. They complained about the smell." "That's just the air freshener," Jake protested. "It's pine-scented. It smelled like something died and was resurrected specifically to die again." "That's also the air freshener. Look, are we doing this maze thing or not? Because I'm starting to think you're stalling." The warden's expression suggested he was imagining creative ways to make Jake suffer. "Begin," he hissed. The entrance to the maze irised open, revealing a corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity, while simultaneously being only 3 feet long. Jake stepped through. Inside, the maze was exactly as advertised. Walls that weren't quite walls. Floors that had opinions about which way was down. Lighting that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was like someone had taken an M.C. Escher painting and given it malicious intent. Outside, in the observation room, every inmate in the facility was watching on screens. This was better than television. This was a human about to get absolutely destroyed by physics. Marcus had his face in his hands. "I can't watch. Tell me when it's over." Jake stood at the first intersection. 4 corridors branched off in directions that made his inner ear scream in confusion. He sniffed the air, looked at the walls, and then casually turned left. "Huh," he said to no one in particular. "That's interesting." He walked forward, his footsteps echoing in impossible ways. The corridor shifted around him, walls sliding into new configurations. Jake didn't seem to notice. He just kept walking, making turns that looked random, but somehow always moved him forward. "This is actually pretty nice," he called out, knowing the monitoring equipment would pick it up. "Like a funhouse, but with more existential dread. I went to a funhouse once in Nevada, got kicked out for pointing out the fire code violations." In the observation room, Kreltok leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "He's just lucky," the warden muttered. "Pure luck." Jake reached another intersection. This one had 6 possible paths, including one on the ceiling. He paused, held his hand up to feel the air, and then walked through what appeared to be a solid wall. It phased around him obligingly. "Oh, I get it now," Jake said, grinning. "This is like that level in Starfall Crusader. The one where you have to follow the environmental cues instead of the visual layout. Classic misdirection." "What's Starfall Crusader?" a guard asked. "Human video game," another guard answered, very primitive. "Apparently they train for real situations by pretending to be in them." "That's insane. That's humans." Jake was narrating now, which made it worse somehow. "See, most people would look at these walls and think they need to navigate by sight. But that's wrong. You navigate by airflow. This whole place has to have life support, right? Environmental controls. The air's gotta come from somewhere." He reached up and touched the ceiling, which rippled like water. "And the temperature differentials tell you where the active passages are versus the dead ends. The maze can shift all at once, but it can't hide the infrastructure." Kreltok's confidence was cracking like cheap plaster. "Impossible," he whispered. "The maze is random, there's no pattern." "There's always a pattern," Jake said cheerfully, turning another corner. "You just have to know what to look for. This is honestly easier than finding parking in downtown Nova Houston." He squeezed through a gap that seemed too narrow for a human but wasn't, slid down a ramp that curved through impossible angles, and emerged in a chamber that pulsed with energy. "Oh, hey, is this the exit?" Jake asked. "Because I see a door that looks very exity." 6 minutes had passed. Marcus had stopped hiding his face. He was staring at the screen with his mouth hanging open. Around him, other inmates were losing their minds, shouting encouragement, cursing in 17 languages, and generally acting like they were watching the sports game of the century. Jake walked to the exit door. He paused, looked directly at the nearest camera, and winked. "Time?" he asked. A guard checked his chronometer with shaking hands. 8 minutes, 12 seconds. Cool. Do I get a prize or what? Then Jake pushed open the door and stepped out of the maze into the exit chamber, where Warden Kreltok stood frozen in absolute shock. The entire prison erupted in chaos. For a long moment, nobody moved. Kreltok stared at Jake. Jake stared back. The guards stared at both of them. Somewhere in the background, an inmate was crying tears of joy. "That's impossible," the warden finally said, his voice small and broken. "I mean, I literally just did it," Jake replied. "So it's definitely possible, improbable maybe, unexpected certainly, but not impossible." Kreltok's scales had gone from their usual intimidating obsidian to a pale grey that suggested his species equivalent of shock. All 4 of his arms hung limply at his sides. "You cheated," he said. "You must have cheated." "How exactly would I cheat? I didn't have any tools, no computer, no weapons, just me and my winning personality." "Dumb luck," Kreltok insisted, but he didn't sound convinced. "Random chance, statistical anomaly." "Want me to do it again?" Jake offered. "I can go faster this time, now that I know the trick." The warden lunged forward, grabbing Jake by the prison jumpsuit with 2 arms, while the other 2 gestured frantically. Tell me how you did it!" "I already told you. During the maze. You were watching, right? Airflow, temperature gradients, environmental controls. This whole place runs on life support systems, and those systems have to track the maze configuration, or people would suffocate when a corridor shifts. I just followed the breadcrumbs." He said it so casually, like he'd just explained how to make toast. Kreltok released him, stumbling backward. "But the maze is designed to prevent that. The environmental systems are integrated into the quantum structure. They're invisible to conventional sensors." "Yeah, but I'm not a conventional sensor. I'm a human. We evolved tracking prey across vast distances using tiny clues. Air pressure changes, temperature shifts, the way moisture condenses. My great however many greats back grandfather tracked a mammoth for 3 days, using nothing but some bent grass and spite." "What's a mammoth?" a guard asked. "Big, hairy elephant thing. We hunted them to extinction, felt bad about it, and then brought them back through cloning because we missed them. It's a whole thing." Marcus appeared in the doorway, having apparently sprinted from the observation room. He looked at Jake, looked at the exit, looked at Jake again, and then burst into tears. "You did it!" Marcus sobbed. "You actually did it! Nobody does it! Nobody ever does it!" "It really wasn't that hard," Jake said, which was possibly the worst thing he could have said given the circumstances. Kreltok made a sound like a dying computer. "Not that hard? 3,000 years. 3,000 years of perfect security. Berserkers failed, telepaths failed, quantum assassins failed, and you, a random human cargo pilot arrested for parking violations, just waltzed through in 8 minutes because you noticed the air conditioning." 8 minutes and 12 seconds, Jake corrected. "Let's be accurate." The warden's eye twitched. It was the kind of twitch that suggested something inside had broken and wasn't coming back. "However," Jake continued, "according to Galactic Prison Regulation 473, any prisoner who successfully navigates an escape challenge must be released immediately. I read up on this stuff during the transport here. Lots of time to kill." "You're not going anywhere," Kreltok snarled. "That regulation only applies to officially sanctioned escape challenges. This was a demonstration. You strapped monitoring equipment on me, assembled an audience, and told me I couldn't do it. That's pretty official. I also told you that you'd die trying, and yet here I am, not dead. Actually feeling pretty good. Little hungry, maybe. Is it lunchtime?" Kreltok drew himself up to his full height, all 4 arms crossed. "I am the warden of this facility. I have final authority over all prisoners, and I say you're not leaving. You'll remain here for the full duration of your sentence. Administrative review, it will take months, maybe years." "That seems illegal," Jake said. "Izumi." "Okay, I will. Marcus, you did tax law, right? You know lawyers?" Marcus, still crying, nodded enthusiastically. "I know so many lawyers, the best lawyers. Lawyers who would love this case." Kreltok's scales were cycling through colors now, settling on an angry purple. "Get him out of my sight," he ordered the guards. "Back to his cell. And someone shut down the maze. Now, before anyone else gets ideas." As guards escorted Jake away, he called back over his shoulder, Hey, Warden, you should really update your security systems. The environmental controls thing is a pretty obvious flaw once you think about it. Kreltok's roar echoed through the facility. It was the sound of a perfectionist having his life, his work, reduced to rubble by a human with a parking ticket. Back in the cell, Jake flopped onto his bunk while Marcus paced nervously. "This is bad," Marcus said. "This is very bad. The warden's going to make your life miserable. He'll find excuses to extend your sentence, he'll lose your paperwork, he'll transfer you to worse facilities. I've seen him do it before." Or, Jake said, staring at the ceiling, something else might happen. "What else could possibly happen?" Jake smiled. "You'd be surprised. What happened next wasn't technically a riot. Riots involved violence, chaos, and general destruction. What happened at Vraxen Detention Complex was something much more terrifying to bureaucratic institutions. It was an organized complaint campaign. It started the next morning, when an inmate named Vex, a six-legged creature with more law degrees than legs, filed a formal protest with the Galactic Corrections Board. The protest cited 17 different regulations that Kreltok had potentially violated by demonstrating the maze and then refusing to honor Jake's successful escape. By afternoon, 47 more inmates had filed similar complaints. By evening, the number was up to 233. The Galactic Corrections Board, an organization that moved at the speed of continental drift, suddenly had to pay attention. Meanwhile, word of Jake's 8-minute maze run had spread through the prison like wildfire. Suddenly, the impossible seemed possible. If a human could do it, why couldn't everyone else? Inmates started demanding their chance at the maze, not violently. They filed requests through proper channels. They cited prison regulations. They organized shifts to ensure someone was always at the administration office, asking politely but persistently for maze access. Kreltok tried to shut it down. He declared the maze temporarily offline for maintenance. This led to complaints about denial of opportunities for sentence reduction. He tried to claim the maze was too dangerous. This led to complaints about keeping inmates in facilities with known hazards. Marcus, emboldened by Jake's success and 8 years of pent-up frustration, became the unlikely leader of the movement. He'd spent his entire sentence being quiet and hoping to be forgotten. Now he stood in the common area with a stack of legal documents that he'd apparently been preparing for years. "According to Article 7 of the Galactic Prisoner Treatment Accords," Marcus announced, his voice shaky but determined, "all inmates have the right to participate in skill-based sentence reduction programs. The maze qualifies as such a program." Cheers erupted. Jake, sitting in the back, gave Marcus a thumbs up. Furthermore, Marcus continued, gaining confidence, "the warden's refusal to honor Jake Martinez's successful completion of the maze violates Article 12, which prohibits arbitrary extension of sentences." More cheers. Someone started a chant. It was in a language Jake didn't understand, but the enthusiasm was universal. Kreltok tried everything. He called in additional guards. He threatened solitary confinement. He even tried bribing some of the more influential inmates with better food. Nothing worked. The breaking point came when the Galactic Corrections Board sent an inspector, not because they particularly cared about prisoner rights, but because the sheer volume of complaints was clogging their system and making everyone's computers run slowly. Inspector Yalara was a floating jellyfish-looking being who'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by anything. She drifted through the facility with an air of supreme boredom, tentacles occasionally tapping notes into a datapad. "Show me this maze," she said, in a voice like wind chimes being murdered. Kreltok, looking like he hadn't slept in days, led her to the maze entrance. "It's a marvel of engineering," he said desperately. "A perfect security system. One human got lucky, but that doesn't invalidate 3,000 years of—" Yes, Yalara interrupted. "Very impressive, very impressive. Now show me the environmental control integration." The warden froze. "The what?" "The environmental controls, life support. The human prisoner claimed he navigated using airflow patterns. I need to see how those systems integrate with the maze structure." "That's classified, security protocols." "Purity." Yalara's tentacles stopped moving. This was apparently her equivalent of raising an eyebrow. "I'm a Galactic Corrections Board inspector. I have clearance for everything short of military weapon systems. Show me the environmental controls, or I'll mark this entire facility as non-compliant and shut it down, pending review. What followed was 45 minutes of technical inspection that made Kreltok's scales cycle through colors like a distressed mood ring. Inspector Yilara examined air vents, temperature sensors, and the central life support hub. She pulled up schematics, she ran calculations, she made increasingly disapproving humming sounds. Finally, she turned to Kreltok. This maze is a disaster waiting to happen. It's perfectly safe, 3,000 years, no escapes. No escapes because anyone who tried died before they could exploit the obvious environmental tracking vulnerabilities. This human, she checked her notes. Jake Martinez didn't escape through luck. He escaped because your security is fundamentally flawed. Kreltok looked like he might cry. It was hard to tell with his species, but the way his scales drooped suggested emotional devastation. Furthermore, Yilara continued mercilessly, I've reviewed your prisoner treatment records. The maze qualifies as psychological torture under updated Galactic Prisoner Rights Law, Section 441, subsection C, which went into effect 2 years ago. Did you update your facility protocols? I may have been too busy to review the updates. That's a no, then. Yilara made more notes. This facility is shut down pending full review. All prisoners to be transferred to appropriate facilities. Warden Kreltok, you're suspended pending investigation. Suspended? You can't. I can and I just did. You're lucky I'm not recommending criminal charges for the psychological torture thing. Back in his cell, Jake was napping. He'd slept through most of the chaos, confident that bureaucracy would eventually do its thing. When Marcus burst in with the news, Jake just yawned and stretched. We're being transferred? He asked. We're being released, Marcus corrected. The inspector commuted everyone's sentences as compensation for the illegal maze situation. We're free. Huh, Jake said. That's nice. Nice? That's all you have to say? Nice? Jake, you didn't just escape a prison. You accidentally shut down the most secure facility in the galaxy and freed everyone here. I really just wanted to get out of my parking ticket situation, Jake admitted. This all escalated pretty quickly. The dismantling of Vraxen Detention Complex took 3 weeks. The actual release of prisoners took 45 minutes because the Galactic Corrections Board, for all its bureaucratic slowness, was very efficient when it wanted to avoid lawsuits. Jake stood at the exit with Marcus, watching as the facility that had held the galaxy's most dangerous criminals for 3 millennia was reduced to a construction site. Workers were already stripping out the maze components. What are they going to do with it? Marcus asked. Apparently selling the quantum technology to a theme park company, Jake said, reading a news article on a borrowed datapad. The Vraxen Maze is going to become a family-friendly attraction called Dimensional Days. They're adding safety rails and snack bars. That's either brilliant or horrifying. Both, probably. Warden Kreltok, stripped of his rank and all 4 arms full of boxes containing his personal effects, walked past them. He'd been demoted to sanitation engineer on a mining station in the Outer Reach. It was the bureaucratic equivalent of being sent to Siberia, except colder and with less atmosphere. He stopped when he saw Jake. For a moment, the two of them just looked at each other. I hate you, Kreltok said finally. I know, Jake replied. If it helps, I didn't do it on purpose. That makes it worse. The former warden trudged off toward his transport ship, scales the color of defeat. I almost feel bad for him, Marcus said. Don't. He ran a prison with psychological torture and acted like it was a gift to the galaxy. He'll be fine. Maybe he'll learn some humility on that mining station. What about you? What's your plan now? Jake stretched, enjoying the feeling of actual sunlight from the nearby star. I need to pick up my ship from impound. Then I've got cargo contracts to fulfill. Lost income to recover. Maybe grab some actual food that doesn't taste like despair. Your ship's been in impound for 3 weeks. The fees must be astronomical. Nah, the Galactic Corrections Board is covering all expenses related to my wrongful imprisonment. That includes impound fees, apparently. I even get compensation for lost wages. Jake grinned. Honestly, this whole thing worked out pretty well for me. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. You turned a parking ticket into a payday. That's the most human thing I've ever heard. We're a resourceful species. They walked together toward the shuttle that would take them to the nearest station. Around them, other freed prisoners were celebrating, making plans and generally enjoying their unexpected liberty. "So what's next for you?" Jake asked Marcus. "First, I'm going to file an appeal on my original tax fraud conviction. With Krelltalk's credibility destroyed, I think I can get the whole thing reviewed. After that?" Marcus smiled, showing too many teeth. "I'm thinking about writing a book, How to Exploit Bureaucracy, a Former Prisoner's Guide. What do you think?" "I think you'd make millions." "I'd better. I've got 8 years of therapy bills to pay for." They reached the shuttle. Jake paused at the boarding ramp, looking back at the prison one last time. The Vraxen detention complex, once the most feared facility in the galaxy, was now just another job site with construction crews and safety inspectors. "Hey Marcus," Jake said. "Do you know any good parking spots near the diplomatic station? I still need to pick up my cargo there." Marcus's antenna stood straight up in horror. "Jake, no. Absolutely not. Whatever you're thinking, stop." "What? I need to complete my delivery." "The ambassador specifically requested that you never come within 50 light years of the diplomatic station. It was in your release paperwork. Didn't you read it?" "I skimmed it," Jake admitted. "Who actually reads all the fine print?" "Everyone! Everyone reads the fine print when they've been in prison." "Relax. I'll find a different parking spot this time. Somewhere legal." "Probably. How hard can it be?" Marcus made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. It was hard to tell. "You're going to end up in prison again, aren't you?" he said. "Maybe," Jake said cheerfully. "But at least I know how to get out now." They boarded the shuttle together. As it lifted off, Jake looked out the window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there was his ship, his cargo, and probably another dozen questionable parking decisions waiting to happen.